Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. This afternoon's guest that we have with us, and so grateful she could be a part of our wonderful online education. We have Dr. Barbara Maddox. Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us.
It is my pleasure. And I have actually been to Marlene's Deli in Port Orchard with a dear friend of mine, Deanna Minnick. And so I'm super excited to get to talk to all of you who found me through Marlene's. So first, I'd like to introduce myself. And my goodness, I'm a cardiovascular nurse, and I spent 30 years working in ICU, CCU, cardiovascular recovery, privately for heart surgeons and cardiologists before I went to medical school to be a doctor of Oriental medicine. And then I finished medical school and was exhausted, diagnosed later with adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, went to see an extraordinary internist here in Albuquerque. And he told me, Barbara, you're doing a really good job taking care of yourself. So why don't you just keep doing what you're doing and pretend you didn't come in here today? And I was just shocked. And that was back in 2000. And I became a functional medicine junkie. And every time Jeff Bland was going to speak, or there was a program within an hour flight, I did it. And then I was the first board certified functional medicine practitioner in New Mexico. So I literally have the Western medical lens, the Oriental medicine lens, and the functional medicine lens that I look through as I evaluate patients and that sort of thing. So I'm bringing to you that 50 years of wisdom and intuition to guide you to know how to create a healthy brain, because the power of that is literally in your hands. And before we get started, I want you to think about, what are your beliefs about your genes? Just think for a minute. Are you concerned that because your aunt had arthritis that you might get it? Or that your father had his first heart attack at age 40? Or that your mom had breast cancer? Or somewhere along the line, you had your APOE4 gene tested, which is one they think is a genetic disposition to Alzheimer's. So if you think for a minute, those genes are not your destiny. And I remember seeing Jeff Bland for the first time, and he stood in front of me, not just me, but in front of the stage with his hands open like a book. And he said, we inherit our genes, our 23 pair of chromosomes, and that book of life does not read based on your genes. It reads based on what you bathe those genes in, what you eat, what you drink, what you think, and how you move. And interestingly, those pillars, if you want to call it that, are at the bottom of the functional medicine matrix called lifestyle factors. And those are the pillars that we can change. And so your genes are not your destiny. Your lifestyle choices and your self-care choices are your destiny. And so you can choose, and you can decide whether you're going to have a healthy brain or not. So, and then this briefly tells a little bit about me. after spending years and years backpacking and camping and hiking and skiing, and who else would make their photo, have them in the woods in a flannel shirt, right? And then I breathe. I'm also a yoga instructor, by the way. I teach yoga teachers training, and teach a restorative class also. And then I have the owl here, because to me, the owl represents wisdom. And the wisdom collected in scientific research is what I'm referring to. And rather than create slide after slide after slide of all the details, I'm just going to share some thoughts with you. How does Alzheimer's develop? Why did we just start learning about this recently? And it was only the last 40 years that PET scans and MRIs came on the scene. And only 15 years or so since they've mapped out different regions of the brain and discovered that there are actually hormones and neurotransmitters, those chemical messengers, that are essential for how our brain functions. And now we know a little bit more about them as they operate on a cellular level. And there are 87 billion neurons in our brain. I mean, that's a huge amount. But they have the capability of creating up to 1 quadrillion connections. And that's a 1 with 15 zeros. And there are 10 times that 87 billion neurons that are the janitor cells for your brain, which means those janitor cells have a really, really important job of cleaning everything up. And that happens when you sleep. The other interesting point is that the brain is the most vascular organ in the body, and it uses the most energy. So as a result, it suffers the most trauma or damage because of the energy it uses, because there's always waste as you create energy. I'm calling it waste. The result is oxidation, which is one of the things that happens to the brain that contributes to causing dementia, of which Alzheimer's is only one kind. And the other thing that makes the brain unusually susceptible to, I don't want to, degenerating, that's a better word than I was going to use. And there's also a blood-brain barrier, which is thought to be impenetrable. And so it's really hard to remove waste and toxins from the brain. And so, anyway, I'm giving you reasons why we now know about all of this. The other thing, and you may be aware, maybe you have a family member that has Alzheimer's, or you know someone whose family has Alzheimer's. The mortality has gone up 145% in the last 15 years. It is the third leading cause of death in the United States. And it is the number 1 cause of death in Japan and the United Kingdom. And many people think that senility or memory lapses, where did I put my keys, are just the natural process of aging. But can be, not always, can be the beginnings of the brain needing attention. And right now, 2023, 2022, there are 6 million people in the US with Alzheimer's. And that's expected to more than double before 2050. So in the next 25 years, there'll be 14 to 15 million people with Alzheimer's if we don't do something about it. I say we can do it for ourselves, regardless of what age you are. And the other interesting piece of it, Alzheimer's is the costliest disease in America. All cancers cost $70 billion. Heart disease, which is number 2, costs $120 billion in a year. Alzheimer's, $305 billion. What I'm not sure about is whether in that amount is included all the medical and pharmacological research trying to find a pill for a cure. And my understanding is there have been at least 15 years of them trying to find a pill. And they have come up empty-handed, not a single intervention that slows the progression of Alzheimer's or decreases mortality from it. And so, and the other thing to think about is that aging doesn't cause Alzheimer's. I mean, we can't freeze ourselves at age 30 or 40. And Alzheimer's is caused by the interaction of our genes with the damage done to the brain through a lifetime of habits and exposures, especially diet, that are unfriendly to the brain. We can't prevent it, as I said, but 90% of all dementias can be completely prevented with a brain healthy diet and lifestyle. And most of the rest can be delayed by as much as 2 decades. So you can prevent that. You can create your healthy brain. And Alzheimer's does not suddenly happen one day, and it builds over decades. And so the time to start addressing this is now. And don't wait until you get a diagnosis. And it isn't just about preventing dementia and brain degeneration, but it's also about making your brain stronger, faster, smarter, and more flexible. And the goal is to prevent damage and shrinkage and optimize function so that you don't create inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, lipid or fat dysregulation, or the amyloid plaques. And the majority of this can be prevented by the diet that I'm going to go into. And I'm going to mention that APOE4 gene again, because I'm sure some of you have heard of that. And people think if you get that, it's a death sentence. And it supposedly makes it so that you are more likely to develop Alzheimer's at age 60 or 65 than if you're older. But the truth about the gene is that it is simply sluggish or slow at clearing up lipid deposits and amyloid plaques. But if you don't have the inflammation, the oxidation, the glucose dysregulation, the lipid dysregulation, you don't have to clean that up. So how do we stop Alzheimer's in its tracks? What are the lifestyle factors that we can modify to create a healthy brain and prevent Alzheimer's? And your diet is number one. And the optimal diet is one that provides glucose for the brain. And I don't mean just plain old sugar, but the glucose that you get from fruits, from complex carbohydrates that ultimately break down and create glucose, because your brain needs that fuel to function optimally. And I can go into more detailed reasons later if we have time about when to eat and that sort of thing. Okay, you also have to limit the amount of garbage that the brain is exposed to. And this would be processed foods, the crackers, the chips, the pretzels, the goldfish, the popcorn. The list goes on and on and on. The difference between could you pluck it out of your garden, or the eggs out from under a bird, or the animals on your farm raised in a pasture, versus something made in a factory. And the saturated fats that come primarily from animal food. There is your brain and your gut. I'm sure you've heard about the gut-brain connection. And your microbiome loves fiber. And there is not an ounce of fiber in anything from an animal. So the other thing about the toxins, I'm thinking of things, and we don't think of it. Scented candles, plug-in air fresheners sprays. Those are the first few that come to my mind that we're not aware of or don't think about. And I mean, I have a list this long of things that you have to, and it's not meant to scare you, but it's just be aware and make your choices. And then the other thing we have to avoid is damaging the brain structures. And that would be from eating the wrong foods, there are all sorts of, the oxidation is going to damage the structures. And then I think you all can see this. I realize it's tiny print, but I wanted to get it all in here. And so what do you eat to save your brain? You feed your microbiome, and its favorite food is fiber. And the microbiome is the more than 38 trillion, bacteria that live in your gut. And they literally run the show. And we think, I can't digest fiber, but they can. And they digest the fiber. That's their favorite fuel. And it creates either inflammatory or anti-inflammatory chemicals, cytokines, hormones, etc. The other very interesting piece is that the gut-brain connection, microbiome to brain, is a two-way street. It isn't just the brain telling the gut what to do. In fact, when they measured this, that 90% of the signaling on those pathways goes from the gut to the brain. And so it is critical that you eat to feed and nourish your microbiome in order to improve your mental health, your memory, balance your mood. The neurotransmitters, most of them are made in your gut. Serotonin for sure. And that is made in your gut. And so I elaborated, you want to eat the rainbow of vegetables and fruits, every color, every day. And it's just full and rich with antioxidants. And one plate of greens provides all the minerals and B vitamins you need. And that would be spinach and kale and chard and arugula, even some of the lettuces. The leafy greens are some of the most anti-inflammatory foods you can eat. And then you want a plate of the deeply colored fruits and vegetables, because they provide the antioxidants, the polyphenols, the anthocyanins, and these protect the cells from damage. And then you also want a plate full of sulfur-bearing vegetables. And those are your crucifers, asparagus, garlic, onions, because sulfur is key to creating glutathione, which is the major antioxidant that works in your liver, that protects you. And without enough sulfur, interestingly, your liver will strip sulfur out of the cartilage in your joints, because sulfur is so critical to the metabolic pathways of detoxification in the liver. And that's why when you take glucosamine sulfate, MSM, chondroitin sulfate, the liver gets that sulfur, so it's not stripping your joints, so your joints feel better. I mean, it's like, wait a minute. But it's very interesting how that works. And then if you're going to eat animals, and I'm not opposed to eating animals, you want to be sure that they are pasture raised, not just free range, because they can write free range if they just have a door, even if they never go out the door. So you really don't want that. And often eating, how many times have you seen no antibiotics added, all vegetarian diet? Well, you know what? Chickens, for example, are not vegetarian. Neither are turkeys. They're out in the grass eating the bugs, and so what they get fed, if they're in a free range environment, is often that they have small doors they can go out of, but then they have corn and soy. And then we get that, much of which is GMO'd. And if you eat cattle that are free range and get the corn and soy, that's what they feed them in the feedlots to fatten them up. So you need to be very vigilant if you're going to eat meat, where it came from, because it gets higher and higher concentrated into us, because we're at the top of the food chain. And then you want to drink half your body weight in ounces of water every day, clean, filtered. And if you do exercise a lot, you want to drink a little more. If you're in a climate where you're sweating or hot, or it's full-blown summer, you want to drink a little more. If you have reversed osmosis water, you want to add minerals and or electrolytes, because all of that has been stripped out of that reverse osmosis water. It's cleaner, and you're not getting pharmaceutical residues, which most filtered water allows through, but you need to add the minerals and the electrolytes back in. And then the other thing that is so powerful, not only to support your microbiome, but also to support you, is to eat the herbs and spices. Parsley, I've done a whole 30-minute talk just on these herbs. Parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, basil, cilantro, dill. If you're going to eat them, buy them fresh, cut them up, be sure they're not wet, and put them in little glass containers where you can see them in your fridge, so that you use them on your salad, on your soups, on your meat, on your sweet potato, on wherever. Most of them are antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, they're mind-blowing, all the super many benefits they have. And then the healing teas. Oh my goodness. Elderberry supports the immune system and it's antiviral. Ginger will heal your gut. It's anti-inflammatory. It warms you up in the winter. Or if you're a person with cold nature, I have ginger tea every day. Lemon balm is calming. A cup at night is superb. Interestingly, it's also antiviral and anti-inflammatory. And then hibiscus, green teas are extraordinary. They too have the antioxidants, and it's pomegranate is wonderful for heart health. It's been researched. And then yerba mate has, and I just do the original from Guayaquil. It's organic. They plow all the profits back into the indigenous people who do the farms. And it's rich in antioxidants, B vitamins, amino acids. I've never seen that much stuff in tea. Truthfully, I don't know if the other companies who've tried to make yerba mate do that. So the first pillar, if you want to call it that you can modify is your diet. And that is the most powerful of all. Second, exercise. Move to save your brain. And I didn't even write it here, but one of the most important reasons is it improves the circulation and the delivery of oxygen to your brain. And your brain is thirsty for that. And it also can decrease inflammation. It grows your brain cells. Fascinating. It builds, catch this, synaptic plasticity. Remember I talked about how you have all those neurons and then you make connections? The connections are made through synapses, and the plasticity of that refers to the ability of the neurons to modify the strength of their connections. And so it's a very important neurophysiologic process, and it involves networking and development of those networks and the reorganization after you've had a brain injury. And it also is incorporated in those connections, help to weave in recent memories so that they become more permanent. And that happens when you sleep. And then it stimulates the release of growth factors. It reduces insulin resistance. In case you know it, don't know it exactly, you've heard of that, I'm sure. And it just means that your little insulin receptors on your cell membrane have been bombarded with so much sugar that they shut down. And then it takes massive amounts of insulin to open up and let the sugar into the cell. But if it let it in the cell would rupture and die. So you have to try to reverse that. The exercise will let the glucose into the cell to go to the mitochondria so you have energy. It can reverse sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is muscle loss. That just means you're losing muscle mass. And it's the single most important biomarker of aging. And so to continue exercise is going to help maintain your lean muscle mass. It also supports a healthy immune function, and it decreases the risk of cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis, heart disease. And I'm going to show you what kind of exercise you need to do. Oh, one more thing. Research showed that leg strength, the strength of your legs, not your whole body, not your arms, not your push-ups, the leg strength is directly correlated to a stronger, better capacity in your brain. Fascinating. And then you can design your own exercise program. And the most important thing, be sure you enjoy it. So select some cardiovascular activity, whether it's walking, biking, swimming, Nordic tracking, whatever you like, be sure you enjoy it. And 150 minutes a week is a good marker for that. And you could divide that out in 6 days. That would be 25 minutes each day. And you can even do that in divided doses. And you don't have to run and sweat. You can just move. And you want to do some strength and resistance training. There are all sorts of ways to do that. You can even get, with minimal equipment, you can do your own strength training at your house. The other thing that's super important is flexibility and being able to, and I don't mean just reach over and touch your toes, but there are all sorts of things you can do, even just, stretching like this while you're sitting in the chair, or, reaching overhead. I mean, it seems simple, but it's super important. And then balance. Balance is critical. And there are ways to do that. I actually have a foam roller, and I cut it in half lengthwise and then stand on the rounded side of it with one foot in front of the other, and just see how long it takes you to just stand there. And after a while, get yourself a ball and bounce it, one on one side, one on the other side. See if you can stand on one leg. There are all sorts of ways to do it. You can even do that on the floor in your kitchen, where you've got a solid ground, and just stand on the lines in between your tiles. You don't have to get a roller. The other really interesting thing is yoga. And I don't mean hot yoga, and I don't mean go in and sweat and lose all your vital yin fluids. But these are researched. What I'm telling you, I don't have the markers on the bottom like IFM requires, but this is all scientific based stuff. Otherwise, I wouldn't be telling you. Otherwise, how would I have credibility if I just made stuff up, right? Okay, yoga increases brain thickness, which when measured, they have an increased cognitive capacity. It decreases the production of inflammatory molecules. It improves the connection between your muscles and your mind, because you have a better sense of where you are in space. So you're much less apt to fall, or if you trip, you're much more apt to catch yourself before you hit the ground. It's mind-blowing. It improves all of your neural connections. So those quadrillion, it may not be quadrillion for every neuron, but you improve all those connections in your brain. And you actually can build new neurons and improve the connection with the synapses. And then you can increase the BDNF, which is the brain-derived neurotropic factor. And that is what contributes to making more neurons and enhancing what they call neuroplasticity, which is a broader term for what I just described with the synapses. And then this is super, super interesting. The amygdala is the part of your brain. It's like the reptilian part of your brain. It is not under your direction. It is the part of you that responds to stress within the autonomic nervous system. And its set point, it has a set point of what's going to stress you enough to send you into fight or flight. Okay, I'm sure most of you heard of fight or flight and the sympathetic nervous system. When you do yoga, it raises that set point. So it takes more to send you into fight or flight, which is fabulous. You don't want to be freaking out because the television went out, because the wind blew your Comcast cable, and freaking out at that, the same way your garage door opener got lost, versus you got the notice that you have cancer. I mean, there's a big difference here. The other thing that you can do is you can optimize your brain. And optimizing your brain means that you are doing everything you can to allow those connections to occur more frequently, and have more of them occur. And how do you do that? You feed your microbiome, which we already talked about. You exercise and create your own exercise program. And you get restorative sleep, which we're going to cover in a minute. And then you can actually improve your memory. And there are several, your brain loves challenges, not simple things. It really wants to be challenged. And it also, if not given new challenges, it will fall back into old patterns and old habits. And when I say new challenges, I'm talking about trying to learn a second or third language, maybe learning to play a musical instrument, maybe deciding you're going to take a watercolor class or a painting class. I have a jigsaw puzzle up all the time, and I do that. The word jumbles in the newspaper are challenging, and pretty soon you realize it's better, you're faster at it. But new challenges are, the brain loves it, and your memory will improve. And there's long lists, but I'm not going to get into that now. You just need to challenge your brain. And then increasing your focus. And we get scattered when we have more on our plate. And that's a more common thing for those of us who are mothers, wives, children of aging parents, students, career women. You're managing the finances, you've got a home, not to speak of all the other things that happen, and we get scattered. And so there are ways we can improve our focus, and your brain is happier when it can focus. And then enhancing resilience, there's a long list of those things. The one that struck me the most was getting out in nature every chance you get. And we all have, I'm sure you're familiar with brain waves, and the brain waves that are normal are called beta waves. When you do meditation, contemplation, prayer, the brain waves are more alpha, okay? They're a little bit slower, a little bit calmer. That is the natural wave, energetic frequency of nature. And so being out in nature is crucial to just bringing you down a few notches, and your brain goes, "Ah, oh, thank you." So it's really, even if you walk out in your backyard, that's nature. And also trying something new, I just mentioned, because helping your brain be resilient is the key to how you're going to optimal aging, I guess is the best way to say it. And they've done studies. The one that comes to mind is they studied the cab drivers and the bus drivers in London over a period of time. And then they measured brain waves and different brain testing. And what they discovered was that the cab drivers had larger brains in the memory portion than the bus drivers. And they were like, but the cab drivers had to figure out a new route every time somebody got in the car. So it was challenging the cab driver to create a new roadmap every time he had a fare. And the bus drivers were just driving the same old route. And so there are things like, even part-time, write with your non-dominant hand, drive a different way to work, or to take your children to school, and just challenge your brain. And it can incorporate all that, and it'll be very happy with you. And the single most damaging thing to your brain, I told you food was the best way you can help if you're eating good food and healthy food, is stress. And stress is awful. Instead of going into all the stress, I have a list here of things you can do that will decrease your response to stress. And I recommend that when you first open your eyes in the morning, that you just sort of scoot up in bed or get in a chair and spend 3 to 5 minutes just being still. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. Just be still. Connect with your inner authentic self, with your spiritual connection, whomever, whatever that is to you, and just be still. It'll change the whole outcome of your day. And then, of course, you can do meditation, prayer, contemplation right along with that stillness. And I'm a huge advocate of having a gratitude journal. It is one of the highest vibrational frequencies on the planet. And the more thankful and grateful you are, the more abundance comes to you. And so you can write in a gratitude journal. There's a fabulous book called Magic, if you're interested in finding more about gratitude. There's all sorts of breathing practices, deep belly practices, breath work, spend time in nature, do yoga, sign up for a Tai Chi class, Qigong, restorative yoga. I teach restorative yoga every week, and I have for 23 years. You should do one restorative yoga pose every day, doesn't matter what time it is. And then laugh, play, have fun whenever you can. And listen to music that you love. Care for plants. That's huge. And then connection is super important. And connect with like-minded, supportive friends and family. And then restorative sleep, we've already mentioned that is the time that your brain takes out the trash. And if you've got 10 times more janitorial cells than your regular neurons, so it must be a pretty important job. And if you don't get enough sleep, imagine those brain cells rushing through to take out the trash. I mean, imagine in a big factory, and they're dumping the trash and they spill it and they throw out the computer and they get rid of the wrong file. And you wonder why, after only sleeping 6 hours, day after day after day, that you're not feeling so good. And it takes its toll. And it does support everything that I have mentioned here. And make it a priority. 7 hours is the best. They did studies on snipers from the Marines, and those who got 7 hours or more, 99% on target. When they dropped down to 6, it was only 95% that they could hit the target in the center. And when they got down lower than that, it dropped down to 80 something or other. And not getting 7 hours, you wake up as if you'd had a drink of alcohol. It just numbs things. Simplify your bedroom. There are only 2 things you do in the bedroom. It's not television. It isn't anything. You sleep and sex. That's it. And make it a sanctuary. Don't have piles of books and old clothes and dirty laundry, and get the computers and that sort of thing out there. Keep it cool, keep it dark. I've listed it all here. Exercise will help you sleep better, but do it in the morning. Be mindful of alcohol. Alcohol may help you relax, or so you think, but it prevents you from getting to the deeper levels of REM 3 and 4 sleep. You just can't get there. So if you're going to have a glass of wine, have it with your dinner 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed. Limit the caffeine. It takes a good 8 hours for even half of the caffeine to be out of your system. So you can lie there like this thinking you're not buzzed from the caffeine, but you might be. Close your kitchen after dinner unless you have waking up in the middle of the night, but that's an individual thing. And then get your mind ready for sleep. Follow the power down hour and use the 3 by 20 rule. An hour before bed, the first 20 minutes, get things ready for the next day. Pack the kids' lunch, put out whatever you're going to need, anything that'll make your morning easier. The next 20 minutes, do your hygiene. Shower, wash your face, get on your jammies, whatever. And the last 20 minutes, do something calming. Maybe that's when you do the restorative yoga pose. Maybe that's when you meditate. Maybe that's when you read a book that has nothing to do with work that makes you feel calm. And then you're ready to go to sleep. A healthy brain is in your hands. And now, right now, is the time to begin making changes in your lifestyle to keep your brain healthy and prevent Alzheimer's. Right now, I don't care how old you are. And you don't have to do everything all at once. And we all fall off the wagon and we backtrack. And if that happens, be kind, be compassionate with yourself, and just pick yourself up and keep going. So I will gladly entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maddox. Beautiful presentation.
You are so welcome.
So we do have a question in the chat, and I might mispronounce the chemical constituent, so bear with me. What about thiamine in kale that it absorbs?
Wait a minute here. Oh, the thallium.
Thank you, thallium.
Okay. It depends on where you get your kale. And I know there was a period of time when the Colorado River was filled with thallium from the fields that were draining. I don't know if that is still the case. And I don't know if you can test for that. And there are other greens. Kale is supposedly one of the most filled with nutrients, but arugula and spinach and chard and mustard greens, if you're worried about the thallium in the kale, and I know I've told some of my patients that I'd really rather not have you, and you can test and see if you are thallium, if you do have thallium toxicity. Do you know that you do have it, Cameron? And you can.
I don't know if I have it or not. I just have been trying to avoid kale because since I heard that it absorbs the thallium from the environment.
Okay. Yeah, and as I said, the thallium I was most aware of was in the Colorado River Basin, and when they were doing the fracking, and I thought perhaps they had stopped some of that, but I honestly don't know. I too stopped eating kale. But there are plenty of other greens that didn't have that same absorptive, at least that was my understanding. So there are plenty of other greens where you can get your B vitamins and your minerals, which is one of the reasons they're so powerful. So
That is fascinating. I hadn't heard about the thallium and kale connection. So that's a great question, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. So what are your thoughts on phosphatidylserine?
It depends what that's in reference to.
Oh, I've just heard that it helps with brain health, and I believe if you take it with glutathione, it also helps the glutathione to get through the blood-brain barrier, but I wasn't too sure about that.
Interesting. In terms of prescribing supplements specifically to support the brain, I do that on an individual basis, depending on what else is going on. And so it's not a bad thing, but you want to be sure you're getting the best product you can. And again, it depends on why you're doing it. So, and I am launching my signature program, The Heart of Functional Medicine, Spiritual and Soul Healing. It's literally my life's work, in a couple of weeks. And you can find out more information about it on my website, which is right here. It's www.northpoint with an E on the end, med.com. And the Spiritual and Soul Guide to a Healthy Brain is also in there. I'll be teaching that, guiding that in January, from January until June. And you can also, if you are interested in finding out more information about what I do or interested in working with me individually, you can book a free 15-minute call on my website that I just gave to you. And we can see if I can help you with your optimal health needs. You can also email me, northpointmedicine@gmail.com, and it's North Point with an E on the end. So, and if anybody else has any more questions.
Cameron said, my understanding is well, thank you. I switched to chard as my main green.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And there's lots of thank yous and very informative. And we thank you so much, Dr. Maddox, for your time today and fabulous presentation. I know I learned a lot, and I know our wonderful attendees here on the Zoom meeting and watching the replay are very appreciative for you sharing your expertise. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
Well, we're going to say goodbye to our Facebook Live friends. Thanks for tuning in, folks. And definitely stay tuned for more wonderful classes.
May I say one more thing?
Of course.
I have a Facebook group called Functional Medicine Collective, but the best way to get there, because if you put functional medicine in, I think there are about 100 different groups. Just in the middle of my home page on my website, it says join Facebook group here. You click on it, it takes you there, you answer a couple questions, and I try to go live almost every week. So
Fabulous. So there you go, folks. You can catch more of Dr. Maddox. So hop to our website and join that group.
okay.
Yay!